Julie, just let me know when I need to say anything.
I think we are up and going. So, thank you all for just a fantastic, engaging conversation that I think we've demonstrated that you can definitely not replace anything in person for sure, but you all sure make it feel like we can still really be engaged and having important conversations together that could keep moving this forward in a good way for what we need to be building to in this moment. And so we're going to turn to Aranzazu first from one of the breakout groups, just for, we know this is like one of the hardest tasks that I think many listening will appreciate, of facilitating conversation and then about 10 seconds later saying, hey, could you report out on that? And so we just are super appreciative for Aranzazu and Bill taking this on and just giving some really, high level points from what we just discussed that we'll be reporting back out to all of you when everyone's had an actual moment to reflect. But with that, I'll turn it over to Aranzazu just for some of those high level points. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. And also really thank you to Itzel and to Jackie for also taking notes and making sure we got track of who was part of our breakout group. And we had a sensational breakout group, really wonderful, sobering information, helpful information. But the key items that rose were really, a theme was really land acquisition. And I think this spread out across most of the participants, and the need to acquire land, how to acquire it, what kind of ownership status would that look like. One of the ideas that came out is land trusts that Christina Peterson talked about, which sounds really promising. An idea to hold land in collective and hold that land, regreen that land, revegetate it with all the things that might be useful to a community as they prepare to move into that space. Again, huge challenge, land acquisition, the funds that are needed to acquire land. Community engagement, essential. Community-led process of relocation and site expansion is essential. We talked about scientists, the role of scientists in this, that we need, there is a room and space for Western scientists, but that one of the needs is to train scientists and such, and being able to provide the information when asked, but making sure that it's being driven by the community, so that communities can then make the decisions of where they might move to, relocate to, what timing, that there are very much some sort of physical science questions that might need to happen before the community needs that. But definitely training for scientists and that way of knowing, being mindful of community processes and letting that happen. A big connection with food sovereignty. We know that we're living in really in recently unprecedented times with a lot of multipliers right now. Food sovereignty and resiliency are very much at the forefront of this topic of relocation and site expansion, and the political forces that are behind that, the historical legacies and injustices behind that. But that we might have an opportunity at the current moment we're in, thinking that there might be a possible administration change, that having some guiding principles or position papers with being vetted certainly by this community and as many communities as we can, having some guidelines in place to help new administration think about the funding that's needed, the data sovereignty issues that are needed, the language issues that are needed, and the sovereignty issues. And so that might be a good step forward, as well as making a connection to the Thriving Earth Exchange group that came up. Several folks knew about them, the opportunity to have a community of scientists work with a community in helping to answer some questions before they move deeper into the planning process. So I'll leave it at that. Lots of other good information came out of that as well. And I'll pass it on to Bill.
All right, thanks, Aranzazu. That was great. And like your session, ours was, we had a great discussion, it really illustrated the complex and multi-layered aspects of relocation. And there it's a very in-depth yet discussion. Yet I think there are at least a few themes that arose from it. I'd like to summarize them quickly, and I know there are going to be things that I missed in it. But thank you everybody for participating in that. And what I want to remind everybody as well is that this is just the beginning of where we go next, to think about how this informs us to do that. We have a mixture of things that are urgent, because things are happening right now. We see Southeast Louisiana, we see things going on in Alaska, we see things in Puerto Rico and the islands, and decisions have to be made now, as well as issues of funding, and not just land acquisition, but funding, how you get these things done. And the challenge with that is that the statutes, the rules and policies are, that whole decision-making process doesn't work on the same time scale as the urgency of the need. How do we address those things? The need to empower communities is something fundamental that we've all talked about, but it is not just their own decision-making, but it is getting them engaged from the very beginning, from being able to articulate and see what their needs are and what possible solutions may be, to the developing the design of what those solutions are, but also in the final decision-making process as well, and how we do that. Partnerships are so important to everything, and as well as institutional support. But the difficulty with the feds and other groups that provide the funding and capacity building stuff is that they don't understand, that given the processes, that what the community needs is through their lens and not necessarily through the lens of those that are forming those policies. So there needs to be that bridge, and how we build that bridge is an issue. So part of that is, and it's not addressing the short term, but the long term is investment in relationship building, because that's so important. That builds towards being trusted, with trust relationships, but also with whoever you represent will determine whether or not they're trustworthy of working with you and building those bridges. What else? Dan brought up a great idea. Was we recognize how hard it is, but I think a lot of others that are outside of Rising Voices don't really understand the difficulty of pushing these issues through. And when we look at partnerships, we're looking at it from the perspectives of where we each come from. But what Dan had recommended was that we started engaging more directly with tribal leaders, groups like NCAI, the National Congress of the American Indian, regional associations, less native communities, the American Indian, or the Indian Gaming Association, and those that come up with funding to do some of these projects, and even develop something like an Eco Ambassador program with different students during the summer, and to actually do some of the work on those issues that we'd like to move forward on, and for them to come up and make the investments as well. And to go along with that, Deborah Butler had come up with the idea, and it's a great one, is that the historically Black colleges and the African diaspora, although they're not tribes, they're still indigenous to some of the lands that are encompassed within our, not just within the U.S., but within our closest neighbors as well. Is that if our groups can get together and really engage among each other, that could be a really powerful voice in not just developing our narratives, but controlling the narrative. And then, among the long-term strategies, could be, and it's something that I brought up from a climate meeting that went to last year in Spokane, where Paulette and Dan were at. There's a village tribe of Northwest Indians that put it on. So there's a state legislator from Oregon who's a native, and she said, run for dog catcher, run for elected office, and say just work for the government, because we need everybody in those positions, because in the end, while we can provide access to capacity building and even to education is still going to be the decision making that needs to take place. So we work at it from both ends, for the short term as well as the long term. That's the way we can make those biggest differences. So in building those partnerships, it's trying to understand what those long term goals are that go along with the short term needs and start from there. I'm just sort of going over my notes. I think that's about it's sort of the main context. There are a lot of other issues that came up within that, like historic trauma and how that plays a role in the way in which we are seen from others and how we articulate those issues, but also what drives the way in which we view the challenge that we have before us. So I will stop at there, and again remind everybody that this is the beginning of that conversation. And I'll put in a plug for our next one next month. Please feel free to be a part of that and bring your thoughts taken from this to the next one. Mahalo.
Hello.
Yes, thank you very much, Bill. And I was in that group. It was a wide-ranging conversation, so that was a challenging and very thorough summary, just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you again, everybody, for being part of this. And I just wanted to send a reminder. I did put the evaluation link in the chat in the YouTube, and I will do that again as soon as I finish talking again. We are really taking into consideration all the feedback that we're able to get through the evaluation form. Given that this is our new era of Rising Voices programming, we really want it to be responsive to your feedback going forward. And so that continual feedback each time we have one of these gatherings is very, very helpful, and we do respond to it and take it into account. In terms of next steps as well, we will be compiling these notes at a high level with a summary of each of the sessions that are each of the breakout groups that we will share with you through the Rising Voices email list. If you are not part of that list and you would like to be, please email Julie or me. You can also find our email addresses on the Rising Voices website. If you Google Rising Voices, that should come up for you. Maybe Rising Voices National Center for Atmospheric Research. And the second next step is next month in July, we will have our working group on energy systems. We will be sending more information about that shortly. Again, thank you all so much for being part of these really important conversations, and not just conversations, right? Informing just and fair actions as well, which we can all take forward from these conversations. With that, I'll hand it back over to Julie.
Yes, so just to kind of wrap us up for the moment, these things obviously don't run themselves. There's a lot of folks behind the scenes, and so huge thanks to the folks at Lomakai and Olohana, to Chris, to Julie, to Mariah, to the whole crew, to Hank. Just monumental thanks for being here with us and providing your guidance and leadership, and to Ranzazu and Bill, who have really been the energizers behind this group and keeping it going and keeping this conversation moving forward, focused on community relocation, site expansion, and with the depth of gratitude to you both. And while we do work to capture a lot of this to share back with the broader community, especially those who are not able to attend at the moment. We know there's a lot going on. That doesn't happen without the help of both my former and current students, Itzel and Cambria and Jackie, and many others who have been participating in this, that volunteer their energy and services for this community. And so a lot of that behind the scenes that really makes us all continue to function and thrive. And so deep appreciation. You are loved by this community. And so with that, I hope everyone continues in good health and well-being, and we will be seeing you in the energy sessions next month. We will be sending out messages quite soon about that. And with that, I will hand it over, I believe, to Hank to close us out for today.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, our listening audience also, but more importantly, our ancestors. They have certainly been with us. I can see it on you guys' faces that you guys know that. So rather than we're not just going to end we're going to just close a little section because we want to leave those pipelines open now that they're here. So anyway, thank you folks very much. I hope everybody comes back and joins us at Rising Voices. And you can find us on YouTube and Facebook, I believe. Anyway, thank you again. Aloha mai, aohio. Okay.
Five o'clock alarm bell rings, same thing every day. They'll answer the phone, I'm not home, I'm already on my way. Out the door, down the street, got to keep me on my feet. I got coffee, I got donuts, in the office down the street. And the fat hat lady's faking a heart attack. And my manager yelling at me, say, can't give her money back. Bank called, the notice overdue. And that's just one more thing I gotta do till I get off the earth. Till I get off the earth. 12 o'clock, the lunch bell rings. Same thing every day. You better answer the phone in the proper tone. Yes, sir, whatever you say. Right on time, on the time. Got to keep me on my feet. I got contracts, I got lawyers in the office down the street. Jam is backing up, holding out can stand. Things ain't working out the way I had them planned. Ain't call the meeting, just a drink or two. That's just one more thing I gotta do till I get off the road. Till I get off the road. I get off the road. I get off the road. 6 o'clock, it's the happy hour. Sipping on the whiskey sour. Bartender asking about a refill, and I'm wondering who's paying the bill. The ladies be heating the call, sugar babies, one and all. My boss be dancing on the dance floor, so I'm heading out that door. And I'm making my move, I'm breaking out this bar. And I'm getting my groove on. I'm driving home in my car, and the blue light comes flashing into view. And it's just one more thing I gotta